Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, as county schools reopen, shocking report reveals that less than half of MCPS third graders can read at grade level. Why is there no outrage from county officials? And why is Mark Elrich refusing to follow Governor Hogan's plan to reopen Montgomery County businesses? Republicans in the county say that mail-in voting makes voter fraud more likely. Our special guest will respond. And our election weather vane. Which candidate has the advantage this week? Stay tuned. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former County Council member Mike Knapp, Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, education activist Cynthia Rubenstein, and our special guest, Chairperson of the Montgomery County Board of Elections and a former panelist of 21 This Week, Jim Shalleck, who will tell you how safe your vote is during this turbulent election cycle. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. It's hard to imagine how voting in an election has changed so much. In the old days, we took a piece of paper and we scratched out our name on it to cast our ballot. We even had people mark the ballot with an X and then have someone write their name next to it. During the turbulent times of COVID, we are certainly looking for new and exploring other ways of voting for our general election. I'm pleased to announce today that our guest is James Shalleck, who is president of the Montgomery County Board of Elections, and he's here to explain to us how we can safely vote in this next upcoming election in 2 months. Jim, take it away.
Thank you, Casey. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. You know, we have over 700,000 eligible voters. We're bigger than a number of states, but because of the pandemic, we had to change basically the entire structure of the election. There's two ways you can vote, by mail or in person. By mail, the governor has dictated that we send out applications for ballots for individuals to send back to us an application for a ballot. That's different than the procedure we used in the primary, where we just mailed out ballots to addresses. The safeguard with this method is that we're not sending to an address, we're sending a ballot to a person who has requested it. Those applications basically should have been received by the residents in the county. And once we get that back, we're anticipating all the ballots to be delivered by the very beginning of October, end of September. We urge people to mail them back as soon as possible. Now, with the concern that a lot of people have about the post office, we will have at least 40 drop boxes around the county at the early voting sites and at the 25 high schools and some additional locations. So that's the mail-in process. To vote in person, starting October 26th through November 2nd, the day before the election, we will have the 11 early voting sites that we had in the primary. And at the 11 early voting sites, any voter can vote at any one of them. Then on election day, November 3rd, we will maintain the 11 early voting sites. In addition, we've added the 25 high schools in the county. And as we talk, we've also added the conference center, the Marriott Conference Center, and the White Oak Community Center, and the Nancy Dasick Community Center. So on election day, we will have 39 voting centers where any voter can go to any one of the 39 voting centers, and we will have the ballot style for every voter from every different district. So plenty of access for people to vote starting October 26th.
So Jim, look, for people who do want to vote in person and they decide to go to one of these centers, which may not be in their precinct, are their ballots going to be treated as provisional ballots? Or are they going to, and will they have to show proof of identity when they come up to announce themselves? I mean, when you're voting in your precinct, we haven't been asked for proof of identity, just our name and confirm our address.
That process will not change. And a voter can vote at any one of the 39 sites on election day, and it will not be provisional. They will get a ballot and vote. It's just like the old system in terms of the validity of your ballot. So that does not change. You can vote at 39 different locations, and it will be counted and dealt with just as a ballot.
And
Now,
how late will those precincts be open on election day?
We've changed it both for early voting, and it's the same for election day. Early voting and election day, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So we've extended the hours, and we've added all of these vote centers. I want to point out a big issue with voters. The most issue I've heard is people's concern about mailing back the ballot. So we have ordered at least 40 of these drop boxes, which we will pick up at least twice, maybe 3 or 4 times a day. And these drop boxes will be at the early voting centers, the high schools, these additional 3 voting centers, and we're adding some more too, so that people that are not comfortable with the US mail can put it in a drop box.
I want to go to Mike. Mike, do you have a question for our guest?
I do. Thank you. Thanks, Jim, for all that you provided so far. So we know, contrary to what the president said yesterday, that each person can only vote once. But what if an individual has got an application, mailed it back, got a mail-in ballot, but chose not to use it and ends up going to one of the 39 polling locations? Does that, so they haven't voted yet, but they requested a ballot, they had it, but they chose not to use it, went to the polling location. What happens to their vote at that point in time?
When a voter checks in to vote in person and the judge at the table sees on our information that they have requested a ballot, they will be able to vote, but it'll be a provisional ballot, so that we will then review provisional ballots after the election and then confirm or not whether the ballot was actually mailed. So yes, you'll be able to vote, but it'll be provisional until we investigate whether or not you voted twice.
Great.
Mark,
By the way, voting twice is, by the way, it's a crime.
Yes.
Mark, do you have a question?
Yes, you talked about it a little bit, Jim, but I thought it was worth elaborating. During the primary, unsolicited ballots were sent out to everyone, including people who because of the laws, are kept on the voter rolls for a long time after they've last voted. So are those folks who haven't voted for, say, a decade still going to be getting applications in order to vote?
By the way, not voting is not a reason for us to purge you off the list. People can vote or not vote. It's when we receive back a sample ballot or other literature that comes to us where the address is invalid. In that case, they become an inactive voter. Inactive voters can vote in person and give us a new address. So the bottom line is, you show up to vote, you can vote in Maryland. If there's a question about did you mail it in or not, you'll be able to vote a provisional ballot. Everybody votes. We may not accept it as a ballot right at the election day table, but we will investigate to make sure that you haven't voted twice.
Cynthia, do you have a question for Mr. Shalleck?
Yes, I do. Jim, there has been concern that there will be enough trained election judges for the election. Can you tell us where you are with recruitment of election judges and how you're getting the word out and encouraging people to step up to become election judges?
No, that's an excellent question. In a normal election where we have 240 approximately polling places, we usually need close to around 4,000 judges and workers. Obviously, with a maximum of 39 voting sites, we don't need that many. At this point, we're confident that we can man successfully the voting centers that we have, but we're still recruiting because unfortunately on election day or on early voting day, people don't show up, they're sick, they change their mind. So we are actively recruiting as we talk, but we're confident we're gonna have a full complement of workers to do the job. And we're getting help from the county. The county employees have stepped up, and Governor Hogan sent out a directive, and we're getting state employees to help us too.
Jim,
So
with the
everybody's
drop box,
cooperating.
with the drop boxes, isn't there a danger of ballot harvesting? And is that legal in Maryland?
Yes, I mean, Casey, you can pick up a relative's ballot and mail it or drop it in the drop box. I can give my wife my ballot to drop at the mailbox. So there's nothing wrong with taking someone else's ballot and mailing it or putting it in a drop box. The problem is if people harvest ballots and they don't vote them, then that's a problem. But you could take your wife's ballot to vote.
All right, Mark, wrap it up.
I was going to say the ballot harvesting rules in Maryland are much tighter than they are in other states. And I think that's probably worth mentioning, Jim, because in other jurisdictions, it is a concern that campaigns and parties can go out and serve as intermediaries and solicit those ballots. Maryland law doesn't allow that. It allows for spouses and third party, people who have a relationship, and that has to be indicated. Correct?
Thank you, Mark. Jim, I wish we could go on longer, but we have to kick the county council around in our next segment. So I appreciate your being on here today. It's been like old times. It's great seeing you. And thank you for being so informative. I'm sure our viewers will appreciate
Thank you, Casey.
what you brought to the table today.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks,
When we
Casey.
come back from this short break, a shocking new report concludes that half of Montgomery County students, third graders, can't read a grade level, and apparently neither can I. So stay tuned when we come back from this short break. Welcome back. Last week, a state of Maryland assessment reported that half of MCPS third graders could not read a grade level. Shockingly, with public schools opening this week, there's not been a word of outrage from the county executive, the county council, or the Board of Education. Cynthia, why the apathy in Rockville, or is a mediocre education all that can be expected from MCPS these days?
I love it when you give me a false choice, Casey. It is terrible that half of third graders are not reading on grade level. And remember that in the middle of March, our Republican governor shut down schools, and the result was that a lot of instructional time was lost to those students who were learning to read. And
Cynthia, these numbers were the numbers that predated the shutdown for COVID. So this is not about COVID.
oh, well then let me make a correction. It's a problem. And we have, because it is important for students by third grade to be reading at grade level. And then in that case, that problem is being exacerbated by the fact that schools were closed in the middle of March.
Yep, absolutely.
So I don't have an answer for that right now because children are still continuing to be taught virtually, and that is the instruction. It's difficult to have as rich an instruction virtually, especially among the population of children whose technology may not be as accessible, their access to technology, and the fact that I don't know how well you can teach someone to read screen to screen.
Right.
So there should be a lot more
Well, there should be some express
outrage. I don't think outrage is useful. I think nose to the grindstone, and we have to figure this out. That would be useful.
Well, so Mike, whether we choose my term outrage or Cynthia's roll up your sleeve and put some work into it, why is there a lack of leadership coming out of the county council and the county executive's office?
Well, I think one of the reasons is that I don't know that this is a shock. We've known for the last 4 years that more than 50% of our students that are enrolling in kindergarten aren't ready to learn. And so if they're already starting behind in kindergarten, the ability to now make up that gap between kindergarten and third grade is a very difficult challenge. And these are children coming from all over the community. It's not people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds or anything of that nature. It's really a composite of all of our students in our community are not coming to kindergarten ready to learn. And so one of the things that the council is doing and working with the collective impact model of Montgomery moving forward is actually putting funding on the table to start developing an early care and education model that allows us to get those students 2 through 5 who are up to the skills they need to ultimately be able to go into kindergarten ready to learn, so we can then pick them up and then get them to the point they need to be by third grade.
But when this report came out, and it's been over 10 days now, there's crickets. I mean, I've checked the press releases from the county council. I've checked press releases from the Board of Education. There has been nothing written about the fact that our students aren't able to read at grade level. I think it's shocking in this regard. We're going to have to go on to our next topic. Maryland Governor Larry Hogan announced that the COVID metrics have improved so much that all Maryland businesses can move into phase 3 and reopen. Yet the reflexive response from Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich was, it's not safe to reopen yet. So Montgomery County will remain under lock and key for the foreseeable future. I'm going back to you again, Mike, because of your institutional knowledge. You know, why won't the county council force this issue? We have institutions like Flanagan's Harp and Fiddle, a 40-year institution in Bethesda that's closing its doors because they can't make it on just carry out and outdoor dining alone.
No, I think it's a real issue. And I think that the council and I think the county executive have got to move away from it's horrible to do anything. I'm not sure we can embrace a free-for-all, but I don't think anyone's saying that. All along the way, it's got to be an element of moderation. COVID's not going away. We don't know when a vaccine is going to be coming forward. And so the reality is we've got to figure out how we go open up our businesses and open up our organizations in a way that are healthy and safe for people to be able to continue to do business. And we've got to get to that point. It can't be an either or. We've got to start to get to a point that we recognize how to open things up and do it in a way that's safe and can take people's health into account.
Mark, you know, they say follow the science, but if you look at the Montgomery County COVID dashboard, the average hospitalization stays right now for COVID are 74. At the height of pandemic, it was over 500. Our metrics are in great shape. So why is there such fear that we can't reopen safely?
Well, I don't think we're following the science as it's often been described as much as we're trying to position the county. The perception is that being more shut down is farther to the left. We're trying to position the county as being that much more cautious or that much more safe than others. And that's a political choice that's unfortunate. Absolutely agree with Mike. We can do both. We can be balanced. We can be safe. We can come up with strategies to be safe, at the same time do a better job of reopening our businesses.
We know where the frequency of infection is coming from. I mean, the state has good data on this, and it's a lot of it is around large gatherings of family groups. And we know that people who are in bars, and I love bars, but people who are behaving irresponsibly, we know where those infections are rising, and so we should take that into account as we look at how to, open.
But even the modest reopening that Governor Hogan has allowed in phase 3, it's not as Mike would say, it's not the free for all. It's still strictly controlled as to the number of people that can meet, the number of people that can gather in a restaurant. I mean, I think, but we're really at a point where these small businesses are collapsing. I mean, I have small business clients all the time that are coming to me saying they aren't going to be able to make it much longer if the economy doesn't turn around. They're holding on for a hope and a prayer. So I don't know what else to say about this. I just think that the county council and county executive need to relook at their efforts. All right, so our last segment, and this is kind of a frivolous kind of a segment. It's kind of put a kick me sign on the back of me and kick me. But today I'm announcing that there is a new segment that we will run on 21 this week called the Election Weather Vane, where each of our panelists can give their choice and theorize about the weekly performance of the candidate of their choice, how they're doing, whether they're doing well, bad, indifferent, and what's their predictions. So here to lead off is Cynthia Rubenstein.
Okay, well, some good news today for the Harris-Biden campaign. They raised $364 million in August, which is record-breaking, and brought on 1.5 million new donors. Additionally, more former elected Republicans are jumping onto the Biden-Harris bandwagon.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Todd Whitman.
Mike Knapp, your weather vane prediction.
My weather vane prediction. Well, it's clear that 8 weeks out, Trump is behind, and he'll say anything to create chaos. And I think that's only going to get worse as we get closer to the election. And I think that the Biden-Harris campaign needs just to maintain an even keel and show what rational leadership can look like. They don't need to hit the ball out of the park. They just need to show what leadership and clear decision-making can be.
Thank you, Mike. And Mark Uncapher, your parting.
Well,
Parting shot, your weather vane.
My weather vane is speaking of chaos. I think this is a week that has really framed the discussion as to which party, which candidate is better equipped to keep Americans safe and is really able to address the issue of security, which is frankly one of the fundamental objectives of what government or what people expect of government. And I think the president has shown a far better appreciation for that desire than has the Democratic ticket.
You know, all you guys are so serious, so I'm just going to have to give you my weather vane, which is, the death knell for a politician is to be made fun of. And, President Trump is an easy target. But this week, my favorite comic in the Washington Post called Prickly City turned its focus on Joe Biden. And Prickly City is a very left-leaning comic. And this week, it was making fun of Joe Biden having to take naps and hiding in his basement. I think that's a bad sign for the Biden-Harris team. And that is my weather vane. Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from this short break. And welcome back. Now parting shots, Mike Knapp.
Well, this pandemic recession is like nothing Montgomery County has ever seen before. And we've got to be proactive in developing strategies to move forward economically. And we just have got to really start putting some things on the table. And at this point, we're already behind our neighboring jurisdictions. And so I just want to give a shout out that, folks, we've got to get our act together and get moving fast.
Thank you, Mike. Mark Uncapher, your parting shot.
Well, Mike and I did not collaborate ahead of this, but I was going to make a very similar point. Our business model as a county has been a high cost and, jurisdiction with a real appeal, a high standard of living has been built upon proximity to the government. And in this COVID environment, but an environment in which communications can be done with virtual meetings and what have you, the advantage of having proximity to the governor, physical proximity to the government, is gone. And so precisely the kind of conversation that Mike has suggested is the kind of conversation that we ought to have in Montgomery County.
Thank you, Mark. Cynthia Rubenstein, your parting shot.
Okay, well, my parting shout out is to all the MCPS students and teachers and parents who went back to school this week, and especially to MCPS's IT specialists and tech support, because they have been working overtime to make things work for all this virtual distance learning.
Thank you, Cynthia. I thought you were going to talk about the Nationals, Cynthia.
Our
favorite baseball
that is my current.
Mired in last place in the National League East, kind of like when it was damn Yankees time. So
yep, I still love them, but they're breaking my heart.
It's a time to fire Davey. That's the question.
No.
Anyway, thank you, everyone. I want to thank the viewers for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.